Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.
Hey, warmer from the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Cuscusy with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. We're giving you guys a conference preview today. We're taking a look at the Big West, one of the best mid-majors out there in all of college basketball. Certainly going to be a lot of fun to be able to break down this fun conference. A man that has joined me for this breakdown in so many years, Connor Hope. He does an amazing job over at HXCBB. I know that he's doing good work with the HXCBB Hangout. I know that he's doing some work over at Sleepers Media as well. He's going to be joining me in the second segment. It's a swan song for a few years where we are going to be having Hawaii and also, I believe, UC Davis leaving the conference at the end of the year for the Mountain West. Next year, we're going to have Cal Baptist in this conference, so we're going to be breaking down the look of this conference for the final time. Hopefully, we'll have them on next year to break down Cal Baptist, but we're going to be looking at all 11 of these teams. We're going to be looking at the coaching moves, the transfer moves, and all that good stuff in the final segment. I'm going to get you guys a projected order finish for this conference, and we're going to be ranking all of these teams. Here in the first segment, going to be taking a look at the betting trends and the styles of play that we have out here in the Big West. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Everything today is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they're making sure that bettors are able to access their funds anywhere and at any time, and that 100% of gambling-related transactions, they're all going to be approved. If you go to EdgeBoost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, GREG. That'll get you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's get down to business and let's take a look at a Big West that is going to be oh so fascinating, where you saw a lot of teams that just hit the glass. They did a great job of being able to pull in those boards, and you saw a lot of varying styles out there in the Big West as well. You saw Cal Poly really crank things up. How about number 2 in the country in terms of total possessions per game? CSUN, Cal State Northridge, they were number 11 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So you had two teams that really cranked it up. You've got an interesting team that was able to be a mixer and shaker that obviously was able to make the NCAA tournament in UC San Diego, that they did a nice job of just being somewhere here nor there. They were, in terms of total possessions per game, in that neighborhood of 243rd, but they just absolutely locked it down on the defensive side of things. You did see UC Irvine, by the way, really speed things up. Typically with UC Irvine, not necessarily a team that is a blazer, but they were 76th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They found a lot of success last season, and it is going to be interesting to see what we get on some of these other teams, as well as we're going to be talking about a team that is very near and dear to me, Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Roadrunners. Traditionally a super slow team, 219th in total 219th in terms of total possessions per game. Still not super duper fast, but it's faster than what we've seen. You had a few teams that were neither here nor there, like Cal State Fullerton. They were 177th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Long Beach State, after they were for so long one of the fastest teams in the country, down to 259th in all of college basketball. So lots of fun there, and if you were able to rebound in this conference, you were able to have a lot of success. If you weren't rebounding, well, it was a little bit more of a rough go of it for you, as one of the top teams in all of college basketball with regards to rebound percentage was UC Irvine. Zots for the Anteaters. They finished up the season in the top 10 in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they made sure that teams were not able to get second and third chances off of them. Meanwhile, in terms of their overall rebound percentage, they were right around 48th in all of college basketball. Your best rebound rate team was actually Hawaii. Rainbow Warriors finished 19th in the country in terms of their overall rebound percentage. Did a really good job of locking things down. Actually, they were second because you also had CSUN. CSUN, number 9 in all of college basketball with regards to rebound percentage. They did a good job locking it down there. Your lone exception of the good teams being really good on the glass was UC San Diego. That was mainly because they generate so many turnovers. They were a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, that they were able to overcome that. But so had a few other teams that were very interesting with the way that they hit the glass, as it was a big giant divide between the haves and the have-nots in this conference. Bakersfield, by the way, they were 85th in the country in terms of rebound percentage, down a little bit from some of their normal standards, but still pretty rock solid. And then you did see a team like Cal Poly. They did take it on the chin a little bit on the glass, but they were able to play that super up-tempo style, 301st in the country in terms of their rebound percentage. Cal State Fullerton got pelted on the glass. They were 293rd in the country in terms of their overall rebound percentage. Meanwhile, you saw with UC Santa Barbara, they were about 193rd, so that caused for a little bit of struggle there in San Diego, by the way, 250th in the country with regards to their rebound percentage. And UC Davis, who took a massive step back last year, 326th in all of college basketball with regards to their rebound percentage. And when it comes to just what you were able to get in terms of betting trends, everyone except for Hawaii in the state of California. So you do not have as much travel as in a lot of other conferences, and this typically yields to road teams doing quite successful with regards to this conference. And once again, it was a big giant divide between the haves and the have-nots. Cal State Fullerton was 4-13 against the spread in their road games last season, and Cal State Bakersfield really struggled on the glass, as man, it was not necessarily too amazing for them in their road games, 3-11-1 against the spread. Meanwhile, UC San Diego, who was just incredible against the spread, we'll get to that in a second. How about them being able to put up a rock-solid 11-3 against the spread in their road games? You were able to get a really nice 12-5 mark out of UC Irvine on the road, Zaza for the Anteaters, and then you had a 9-6 from Long Beach State, 10-7 for UC Davis. UC Riverside, they went 10-8, and then a 9-9 out of Cal Poly. Meanwhile, if you take a look at how these teams were able to perform at home last season, we did notice a little bit more home court advantage, and Hawaii was not one of those teams. 8-11 against the spread. The island did not provide as much of the, shall we say, advantage that you're typically used to seeing. That said, I do think that you're going to probably see a little bit more of that moving forward this season, but UC San Diego was that top team against the spread at home. They and UC Riverside both went 9-4 against the spread. Riverside had a push at home as well. Bakersfield, UC Irvine, they both went 8-6 against the spread at home, and Cal State Fullerton was just miserable last season. Like, you had a few teams that were really, really good in terms of making you money, and then, well, there were teams that were just not. UC San Diego, how about 25-8 against the spread last season? In terms of all college basketball teams, the only ones that were better than them, Robert Morris at 26-8 against the spread, Florida A&M 23-7 against the spread, and not to be chopped liver, but Zaza, the UC Irvine Anteaters, they were one of your better against the spread teams in all of college basketball, 24-14 against the spread. Meanwhile, for Cal State Fullerton, only Eastern Washington and Alabama A&M were worse against the spread. Eastern Washington 7-22-1 against the spread. Alabama A&M, well, they were technically tied with Fullerton. Fullerton was 8-21-1 against the spread. Alabama A&M 8-21 against the spread. And if you take a look at how things went in non-conference play for this conference, I've mentioned it. This, in my opinion, is one of the better mid-major conferences they're going to find in all of college basketball, and that certainly was the case last season, as in non-conference play, you only had 2 teams finish below 500 against the spread. Cal State Fullerton was 3-7 against the spread in non-conference play. Long Beach State 4-7 against the spread in non-conference play. Then you had UC San Diego and UC Riverside go 7-4 against the spread. In the case of Riverside, 7-4-1 against the spread. CSUN 6-4 against the spread. UC Davis, UC Santa Barbara 5-4 against the spread. You had Cal Poly go 6-5 against the spread. Hawaii and Bakersfield, they both broke even, and UC Irvine 10-6 against the spread in non-conference play. And you have so many varying styles with regards to the Big West. You've got some of the fastest teams in all of college basketball. You've got some of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, and that made for a big, interesting sort of what you would do with regards to the totals, as you saw quite a few teams go under, as you had 5 different teams hit at least 55% of their games to the under. Fullerton 13 overs, 16 unders, and a push. Riverside, Irvine, they went 17 overs, 21 unders. UC Santa Barbara 14 overs, 18 unders. UC Davis 12 overs, 16 unders, and 2 pushes. And then UC San Diego, 13 overs, 19 unders, and a push, while Cal Poly, they just absolutely cranked up the tempo. Bookmakers did not know what to do with this team for very much of the season, so as a result, 22 overs, 12 unders. Bakersfield, 19 overs, 12 unders, and a push. Like I said, they were going a little bit faster last year than what you're typically finding with this program, and then you saw Long Beach State have 17 overs to 14 unders. But if you take a look at what we were able to get in terms of the conference games, what happened when things got really honed in, you really did see the overs start to come through. Only 3 teams had more unders than overs in conference play. UC San Diego, 10 overs, 11 unders, and a push. UC Davis, 9 overs, 10 unders, and 2 pushes. Hawaii, 8 overs, 10 unders, and 2 pushes. Meanwhile, you had Long Beach State, Cal State, Bakersfield, and UC Riverside all had at least 60% of their conference games to the over. Cal Poly, 13 overs to 10 unders. Fullerton, 11 overs to 9 unders. UC Irvine, they went 12 overs to 10 unders. And then for Northridge along with UC Santa Barbara, they both had a 52.5%-ish hit rate to the over as well in conference play. So it was a very interesting conference. You've got a lot of intrigue and don't have a ton of travel either, which makes things all the more intriguing with that regard. And we're going to be talking about this next with one of our good friends, Connor Ope. He does an amazing job of taking a look at this great game of college basketball over there at Heat Check CBB Sleepers Media as well. He's going to be joining me next as we take a look at all 11 teams out there in the Big West right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast, the Big West Conference Preview Edition. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast. This is the Big West Conference Preview Edition, and this man has joined me for so many years, Connor Ope. He does an absolutely excellent job over at Heat Check CBB, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love. I know additionally he does a great job with the Heat Check CBB Hangout as well, a nice show/podcast once the season gets all started. He does an absolutely amazing job all 12 months out of the year, taking a look at what we've all got on the college basketball front, and you're able to follow my Twitter/X at HoopsHopeCBB all together. And Connor, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always great to be on.
It is always great to have you aboard, and this conference preview is one that I always very much look forward to. And what if we take a look at this team, as they are very much a gold standard when it comes to the Big West? That'd be UC Santa Barbara, the old Gauchos, where it feels like it's been a little bit up and down for them the last few years. 2 years ago, I had much higher expectations for them. Last year, it felt like they were able to get back online, and we know that with Santa Barbara, they're always going to bring in great transfers, and Aiden Mahaney, I think, is going to be one of the most interesting players in this conference.
I've said this for a while with Coach Pasternak, is that he always has one of the best, if not the best, backcourts in this conference year over year. You look at players that have come out of Santa Barbara, those point guards have been elite. Last year, they looked good. They were a 21-win team, finished towards the middle of the conference, but that was due mainly to kind of a little bit of a slide towards the end of the year. If they win those last 2 games, the home game against UC Irvine, the road game against CSUN, they're probably finishing 3rd or 4th in the conference. They look like a good roster, and Aiden Mahaney is better than what he showed at UConn. We saw him at St. Mary's his first 2 seasons, played well against some very talented teams. Played well against Gonzaga, and even in their game against UConn as a freshman, wasn't the best game for him, but he looked pretty good. I think he is going to do a good job really steering this team in the right direction. It's a little bit of a smaller team. Katenji and Colin Smith as your 2 biggest players. They're both seniors. Myro Little, Jason Fontenette on the wing. Fontenette's returning as one of the leading scorers. Myro Little coming in from Utah. So you add Mahaney and Little, who have high major talent, high major experience to this returning roster. I think that Pasternak has put together a roster that can compete at or near the top of this conference. Talent-wise, it should be there. I think the last couple of years, talent has not necessarily been the issue that sunk the Gauchos.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that for UC Santa Barbara, bringing in Aiden Mahaney, he is much better than what he showed at UConn. Just felt like it wasn't necessarily the world's greatest fit for him in general. And now I think that he's going to be able to get, for lack of a better term, back to happy. And I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a return to back to happy, as well as Cal State Bakersfield. Meet the Roadrunners. They do lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from a season ago, but AJ George, who was in the conference a few years ago over at Long Beach State, is coming in. This is a bunch in Bakersfield that I'm sure that you'd agree with me. Typically, they're playing a little bit slower than what they did a season ago, and I do feel like they have the pieces to perhaps slow it down once again and really do what they do best, be able to really make things a little bit more of a low post game, be able to do a nice job of winning the battle on the glass. And I think that Ron Jessupe, who comes on over from the southeast part of the country, is going to be able to help with that.
Yeah, and you make it seem like they were barn burners last year. They were still a bottom, 125 team in terms of tempo. But you're right. Rod Barnes likes to slow this game down. He likes to play it in the half court. There's a reason why I think their defense is always a little bit better than their offense, and that's just by virtue of playing that half court game, trying to get those, opposing teams to grind it out. For me, a lot of it really comes down to CJ Hardy and what he can do in year two as what I'm presuming to be the starting point guard for this team. When you're playing that half court game that Rod Barnes really likes to play, you're really relying on the point guard to control tempo. He can kind of mix it in a little bit more in the stead of the departing Jamel Jones, of the departing Kadar Waller, who really ran the point for this team last year.
Yeah, but I think so as well. And I do think that for Bakersfield, they're going to be a fun team to watch this season, as shown to me right here on Cusco Hoops. We've got Connor Ope taking a look at the Big West and this team. We talked about Bakersfield being slow. Cal Poly was not slow last year. Your number one under Mike DeGeorge, who came in from Colorado Mesa and just completely changed the fortunes of this team. I know 16-19 doesn't sound amazing, but most wins they had since the 2012-13 season. Obviously, this is not going to be a team that is a top 10 team on the glass or anything like that. They're going to lose a battle down low, but this team showed some very good guard play. They're going to lose a lot from last year, but I think that Mike DeGeorge showed one thing last year. This guy knows basketball, and this guy knows how to coach.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that, and we'll talk about tempo later. The Big West has been historically one of the slower conferences in the country. It was over 10 years that they were in the bottom half in the country in terms of conference tempo. Last year, you saw CSUN try to speed things up. Last year, you saw Cal Poly really speed things up. They were 7th in the country in terms of tempo. Cal Poly really leading the way. This is a team that was a lot better, like you said, than their record showed. They were 8-12 in conference, 16-19 overall, but they had some really close bouts. Had a stretch where, they lost to Santa Barbara at home by 3. They lost to CSUN on the road by 4, and they showed that they could beat some of the top teams in this conference. I don't know if I would say I really like the roster that they have, but I think when you consider how good a coach DeGeorge is, it's all wing players. They're younger. I think they have one senior, maybe 2 seniors that are going to factor into this rotation. And like I said, backcourts in this conference win. Last year, they had Guzman Vasilic. They had Peter Bendelj. They were freshmen. They're going to be sophomore guards. They're probably going to be leading this backcourt. And, as they continue to develop under DeGeorge, within this system, I just think they're going to continue to get better, and we could see a really good scoring attack from this Cal Poly team. I think where you're going to lose as the Mustangs is they're smaller, especially in the front court. We mentioned a lack of height at 6'8". They're going to have 2 players over 6'6" in this rotation, and last year they were 270th in the country in adjusted defense. So they play fast, play efficient on offense, but I think where they could hit some pitfalls is on the defensive end.
Yep, I think so as well. Certainly with Cal Poly, the defense left a little bit of something to be desired, but offensively, that thing was getting cranked up for them. This is a team that needs to get things cranked up on all sides of things. Cal State Fullerton last year. 1-19 conference record, their worst conference win percentage in program history. Nothing doing on offense, nothing doing on defense. I do like the fact that they bring in Jefferson De La Cruz Monegro, who was over at Valparaiso, a 10-point per game scorer. Bailey Nunn, who comes on over from Sacramento State, is rock solid as well. I think steps are being taken in the right direction, but man, Fullerton, after they just a few years ago were in the Big West final in terms of that conference tournament, they've really fallen on some tough times, and I think that for Fullerton, it's not about competing for the upper half of the conference this year, it's just taking steps in the right direction.
I think it's getting back on track with what Coach Dedrick Taylor wants to do. I mean, you look at when he arrived at the program in 2014, for the first 7, 8 years of his tenure at Fullerton, they got after it defensively. They liked to play an up tempo or at least a little bit faster style of play. Then they hit kind of a skid where they slowed the game down. They had 2 straight years where they were 11-4 and 12-6 in conference. In the last 2 years, I mean, they've been, you talk about 1-19, they're 8-32.
And they had no point guard last year.
Over the last 2 years. They tried to speed it up last year with no point guard. And I think that's the issue because Donovan Ode was their best player, a 6'2" off-ball guard. He's not a point guard. And I think they were trying to replace a point guard with Keith Richard, with Lolo Rudolph. Rudolph was a freshman. Richard's not really an on-ball guard either. But I think this year you could get that. I think Bailey Nunn could come in and be a really good point guard for them. He had a 25.5% assist rate with Sacramento State last year as a sophomore. So I think he could come in and really right the ship. It's just a theme. Guard play wins in the Big West. They might not win a ton of games this year. I don't expect them to. I expect them to be bottom 3 in the conference again. I do not expect their offense to be bottom 5 and bottom 10 in the country again.
Yeah, like that was just bad. Fullerton is going to be better this year. The question is, how much better are they going to be? And I think that this team is going to be a little bit better as well as for Long Beach State last year, 3-17. They move on from Dan Munson, and year number 1 just did not go the way that they were hoping for. I do think that year number 2 on Chris Acker is going to be a little bit better, and I saw improvement from the team as the season went along. Obviously, they no longer have Devin Askew. They do lose out on quite a bit of that guard play, but Derek Michael Zeviero is a guy that should be back for this team. They did a solid job of being able to add some nice players in the transfer portal. A guy like DeMarshy Johnson Jr., who's coming in, a former top 200 recruit, I think is going to be able to help this team out. I don't think that they're going to be, once again, competing for the upper half of the conference, but someone like Shaquille Bender coming on over from an end, I do think that that's an upgrade, and I do think that after they turned the ball over so much last season, that they really do dial things in a little bit more.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing with this year's roster for Long Beach State is for as good an individual player, especially by Big West standards, Devin Askew is, he's not necessarily a winning point guard, and I don't know if they're going to replace him offensively this year, but Chris Acker comes from a defensive system as an assistant coach. The move to Long Beach State last year, the defense was bad. I mean, they started off 3-2 in conference with a win over Hawaii, a win over UC Davis, but then it just went downhill and they ended up losing 15 straight and missing the conference tournament. So I think if you look at guys like Bender coming in, those are defensive additions. Bender's not a shooter. He's not really an on-ball point guard, but he can come in and he can be a pretty solid defender for you. I think Isaiah Lewis can come in and be a good on-ball guard for this team, coming over as a sophomore or a junior, I guess. But it's going to be a year where you're really looking at DeMarshay Johnson manning the low post, letting the guards and wings get after it on defense, and hoping you have enough offensively to win games. But I see the vision with what Acker's doing with this roster. With Fullerton, I'm a little bit iffy on the vision, but I see what Acker's trying to do, which is let's kind of recreate San Diego State in Long Beach.
Yep, and I do think that that is going to be very impactful as well, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of them moving forward. As Connor Ope, he does such great work over at HXCBB. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and this team, I think, is just so much fun. Cal State Northridge, I absolutely love the way that Andy Newman has been able to turn around this program, though he is going to be losing so much from a season ago. It's going to be up to Larry Hughes II, which that makes me feel old, and Joshua O'Gara to be able to help out the offense, and we know this team is going to be playing super duper up tempo. This team is going to be looking to bomb it quite a bit with regards to just looking to be able to get those second and third chances, really looking to be able to pound the glass. And I think that's going to be interesting to see if they're able to duplicate what they did from a season ago, just because it takes a lot of versatility to be able to do so. And I'm not quite sure if guys like Josiah Davis and company are going to be able to replace what they had a season ago.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the style of play helps with what they might lack at the top in shooting. Josiah Davis coming over from, I guess this is a sports school, but he played at Niagara last year. He's a pretty solid point guard at this level. I don't have an issue with him running this team, even with as fast as they do play. Turnover issues for him could be an issue, but this is a team, this is a coach in Andy Newman that doesn't really have a huge issue with turnovers as long as the points come along with it. Grady Lewis in year 2, I think could be excellent at the 4 or the 5, depending on where they play him. Probably at the 5. So they have the talent. I think the fact that they are also a top 10 team in the country in terms of tempo will allow them to get out ahead of the defense. If you can figure out a way to get them into the half court, that's where you can really kind of punish them, because they lost a lot of shooters that they had last year. They haven't really added anyone that's proven themselves as a high-level shooter at this level.
Yep, I think that that's going to be a big issue for them. And what is an issue for UC Riverside is the fact that they no longer have Mike Magpayo. Mike Magpayo, I thought, was one of the better mid-major coaches in all of college basketball. So it's going to be interesting to see what Gus Arginal is going to be able to do, because he was at Cal State Bernardino, where we saw the last few years Andy Newman was, and he was able to continue that success. I believe that they made a Final Four at the Division II level during the 2024-25 season. Ben Grischetti, he's going to be back after he was solid during the 2023-24 season. They had in there a guy like a BJ Cawley who had some size over at Montana State. They've got some unproven guys, but it does appear that this is going to be a team that's going to be looking to go a little bit bigger, and I sense that they're zagging while everyone else is zigging out there in the Big West, and that it looks like they're not going to be playing a super duper up-tempo style.
Yeah, I mean, so he made the Final Four in 23-24, and then he finished third in conference and made the second round of the D2 tournament last year, so 24-25. Excellent coach, comes from that Andy Newman system, or at least, same school. My question for this team is, how good can Marquis Worthy and Tyler Jones be? Tyler Jones, a freshman, Marquis Worthy, a junior, coming over from UMass, was an okay guard there, but turnover prone, not really a high level facilitator. Outside of those two and maybe Andrew Henderson, they don't really have a lot of notable on-ball guards, or guards that you feel comfortable putting on ball. And like you mentioned, they are big. And I think this is going to be one of those teams where they are the team that if they can get back defensively and if they can kill you on the boards, it's just going to be a slog to play them every game, because they have a ton of players. Denzel Hines is 6'7", Ben Grischetti is 6'11", Osiris Grady, who's probably their top player, is 6'9". You've got a lot of long wings. Jalen Daniel Dalton is 6'6", and then even off their bench, they've got multiple 6'8", 6'10" players. So they're going big. I think what you're seeing, it is a clash of styles. It's a style of play that I think you've really only seen from UC Irvine and Hawaii over the last couple of seasons, where they've gone really big and really solid inside and let the guards kind of work around that. My only question for this Riverside team is, do they have the depth in the backcourt to support the size on the offensive end?
Yep, and I do think that this is going to be very interesting to see how it all comes together for them, and it's going to be interesting to see how things come together for UC San Diego. Magical year last year. I mean, they come up from the D2 level, first year of eligibility for the NCAA tournament. They make it as a 12 seed. We're within one possession of knocking off Michigan, but Eric Olin, he is now gone. He has went on over to New Mexico, so Clint Allard, he takes over as the new head coach, and it's an interesting group of guys that they bring in. Ty Dunn was a walking turnover over at Buffalo, but he had absolutely nothing around him, and it's very clear that he's a very talented player. They're bringing in someone like a Tom Beatty, who is relatively rock solid over at Hawaii. Alex Chulkin was a really good three-point shooter over at Lafayette. I think that this is a fascinating team, and I think the big question is, can they maintain that defensive tenacity that they showed last season, where they were forcing so many turnovers?
Yeah, I think the benefit is that Allard he spent over a decade at UC San Diego coaching under Olin. Really, from a style of play, new head coaches always like to change style of play. From a system perspective, there shouldn't be much of a drop-off. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of turnover on this roster, namely because last year UC San Diego had so many seniors on that roster. It's going to be interesting. They have pretty solid mix of size. You mentioned Tyson Dunn. He's going to have to be the star on this team. He's proven to be a high volume scorer. He's going to have to get everyone or make sure everyone else gets involved. As someone who's watched a lot of WCC basketball, Bol Bang Deet could be a really good kind of stretch big for them. He's 6'11". He can shoot the ball, can score inside. You pair that with Dunn and you have a really good inside outside combo, along with Aiden Burke, who was at UC San, who's one of their few returners who shot 40% from three last year. They've got some scoring talent on this roster. Coaching can fix defensive deficiencies, I think, a lot easier than offensive. And I think the fact that they have so many good scorers, if he can get all these players to buy in on the defensive end, I think that Allard could have a pretty good team this year.
Yep, and I think that it's going to be so interesting to take a look at UC San Diego and what they're going to be able to do this season, as Connor Opu does such amazing work over at HXCBB. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and even though this team loses quite a bit from last year, I feel like we have the fewest question marks with this team. UC Irvine, because my goodness, Russ Turner, you know what you're going to get out of this program. They are going to get after you defensively. They're going to win the battle on the glass. They are going to be the team that is like going to the dentist that you want absolutely no part of whatsoever. Now, they do lose quite a bit of that scoring. I believe 4 of their top 5 scorers, but Darren Sarin, who had decided to transfer on over to Sanford, he's back after he played pretty much no time over there last year. He's a former 10-point per game scorer for the program. You've got Kyle Evans back. You've got Jurian Dixon back as well. I feel like with UC Irvine, even though the cast of characters is going to be a little bit different and losing a 7-footer like Ben Lyken, that's going to be rough. UC Irvine going to be right back there towards the top of the conference.
Yeah, and I think this is the deepest, or at least the most well-rounded backcourt in this conference. Between Dixon, Sarin, and Lee, they've all been on a Turner-coached team before. You have Lee, who can come in, who can shoot the heck out of the ball. Dixon's not as much of a shooter, but he's a pretty solid defender. He has length. Both of them were freshmen last year, so they'll be sophomores. Sarin is, I think he's technically going to be a redshirt sophomore this year, but also a pretty young guard. The combo of Carrington and Evans in that front court could be a little bit underrated. Evans didn't play a ton, namely because Laketon was there, but he shot 70% on 2-pointers for UC Irvine last year, 71 of 100. He was 85% on 34 attempts, so he's 29 for 34 from the free throw line. Pretty good rim protector, pretty good rebounder. At 6'10", that's kind of big for a center in the Big West. So you might think, oh, 6'10's not 7 foot. 6'10 is the 7 foot in the Big West. So I kind of like Kyle Evans at the 5. You have that backcourt and Kyle Evans. Whatever you get out of Carrington at the 4 is going to be really good. He played for Colorado, didn't play a ton of minutes. From what I've seen from him, he could stretch the floor a little bit. So we'll see what he gives you. But the other 4, I think, are going to be excellent.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that this is going to be another big year for them, and I think that this is going to be an interesting team in UC Davis, because UC Davis last year, the heart and soul of that team was Ty Johnson. Let's call it what it is, and him being out of the fold, that hurts them, but Carl Doherty was a relatively solid player. You've got Connor Sevilla, who's going to be back as well, so that is going to be able to help them out a little bit. They bring in a Central Arkansas transfer and Braden Pajembi. Hopefully I said that correct, and with UC Davis, I do feel like this is a big year for Jim Les. I know there might have been some callings for him to be on the hot seat, what have you. He gets another year out there at UC Davis, and I think that this might be a put up or shut up year after last year. It just wasn't what we expected out of UC Davis.
Yeah, I don't know what really to think of UC Davis. This obviously, it's their last year in the conference, but last year they were good defensively, not so good offensively, and you lose Ty Johnson. I don't necessarily think Sevilla is going to replace everything that Johnson gave you, but he can be a high volume shooter for you. And so if they can figure out how to get him open off the ball, use Fagbemi as the point guard, not really a scoring point guard, a high efficiency scoring point guard, but he can make plays for you as a point guard coming from Central Arkansas. I think those two can be pretty good. It's just a question of, can everyone else around them step up? Because if it's just those 3 scoring, you're going to be in for a long season. Cooper as the 4 or 5, he's not stretching the floor for you, and he's not really a super good defender. It's a small team, the backcourt's going to be really small. And I worry that offensively they're going to struggle. They'll force turnovers. They'll force turnovers at a high rate. I just worry they're going to struggle on the offensive end.
Yep, I worry about that as well. And that's always a worry for this final team as well, as this is a little bit of a swan song for them as the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. I know we've alluded to it a little bit, but there's going to be quite a bit of changing with regards to this conference, and the Rainbow Warriors are going to be adding on over to the Mountain West. But what I love about this team is that you team up two guys that had success over at Evansville. You had seen Toomey, and then you also bring in Tanner Cuff. I recognize that they had a little bit of, shall we say, mixing and shaking there, but those two guys combined with Hunter Erickson and just this overall system of Aaron Ganot, where they play such good defensive basketball. They slow things down very much so. And Keandre Bullock being able to give you some three-point shooting. I look at this Hawaii team, and I don't think that they're quite on the level of, say, a UC Santa Barbara or UC Irvine. I think that they might be that next team down, though.
Last year was his first season with a losing Big West record. I think he had a losing overall record previously, but it was his first season with a losing record in the Big West. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the defense took a step back from where it had been the previous 3 years. And when you're playing as slow as Hawaii does, when you're trying to make these games as low scoring as possible, having a defense that takes a step back is not where you want to be. I think this year you're going to see a difference. They have size at the 5, but most of their scoring is going to come from the guard and the wing positions. I agree with you. I think Tanner Cuff is probably going to be their biggest offensive weapon. Hunter Erickson from Utah, if he can improve on his shooting just a little bit, that'd be great. But even if he is a 35% shooter from deep, he did well at Utah. He did well at BYU to be able to stay on the floor. So those two, plus Bullock from South Dakota, like that backcourt and wing, I think is going to be a really strong position for Hawaii. Whatever you get offensively from the front court is a bonus. You just need the front court really to kind of bounce back from a defensive perspective and be a little bit better protecting the rim and forcing missed shots.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that this is going to be a team that's going to be solid defensively. Aaron Ganot always does a solid job. I do think that we are going to be seeing a good year from them in their last season in the Big West. And Connor, this will probably be the last time we look at the Big West quite in this perspective. Hopefully we can get you back on next year as well when things are a little bit more new look. But I know you're doing an amazing job over there at HeatCheck CBB. I know you do an incredible job all 12 months of the year. Take a look at this wonderful sport of college basketball. So love the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm taking a little bit of a break. Just I have a newborn coming within the next month. HeatCheck CVB will start putting out preseason preview content probably in a month or two. And you can also check out HeatCheck CVB on Twitter or on their website to see what we have coming out just over the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. But it's the dog days of the summer, and based on conversations I've had pretty much every year with Russ Turner, the real basketball in the Big West doesn't start until about September. So really, we won't know what these rotations look like until about mid to late October. Like we won't have an inkling. So a lot of things can change. The players we named could be deeper in the rotation. There could be surprise players that have impressed over the summer and during fall practice that earn their way into the rotation. But I do think that there's probably a clear top 2 in this conference right now in UC Irvine and UC Santa Barbara. But we've said that the past couple of years, Greg, and we've been surprised pretty much every season.
Yes, we certainly have been. And it's a conference where you can expect the unexpected, but we know this. The conference has shown out very well the last few years. We know this. We're going to get great basketball out there in the Big West. I know that Connor is going to be along for the ride for it all. So big thanks, Connor, for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Super Style, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector finish for the Big West. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It was great to be joined by Connor Hope, who does such amazing work. Taking a look at this great game of college basketball over there at HeatCheck CBB. every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He has joined me for this conference preview in quite a few years, and every single time he does so, he lends such amazing insights. So a big thanks to Connor for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soup Style, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And now it is that time that I give you my projector or finish for the Big West. And because I am doing a conference preview today, that means that the last 24 hours of college basketball news and notes are going to be rounded up tomorrow if we do have any. The transfer portal is starting to get very, very thin, so we might not have had anything that I missed. And if you send in any Twitter/X questions over at @GUnit_D1, we're going to be answering those tomorrow as well. But how about if we do get things started with dead last in my projector or finish, number 11? That is going to be Cal State Fullerton. This team was a wet match in a dark cave last year. This team was just absolutely getting destroyed on offense. They were getting destroyed on defense. Bottom 15 in the country in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. Just completely unacceptable there. Now, I do think that they're a little bit better this year because they do bring in a guy in Jefferson de la Cruz Monegro. He was over at Valparaiso last season. He was able to average 10 points per game, and Bailey Nunn, 3.5 assists per game. Steps in the right direction. Kendrick De Luna is your main guy who returns from last season, 5.5 points per contest. They're dumpster diving on some guys from the junior college ranks in Yeson Warren along Davis White. Both of these guys were honorable mentions for JUCORecruiting.com's top 100 junior college transfers for this season, but this is a team that they really are going to need Nunn to step up at that point guard spot, and they still don't necessarily have the world's most amazing three-point shooting. De La Cruz Monegro is not necessarily the world's worst three-point shooter, but still, this is a team that doesn't necessarily have a lot of depth. It's a Fullerton team that they just haven't been able to find themselves in general. So I do feel relatively bearish there, and I do think that it's going to be a long year for them. At number 11, in terms of my projector finish, I am going to be going with Cal State Fullerton. At number 10, I'm going with UC Davis. I am just not in on Jim Les right now because with Jim Les, it was feeling like he might be out of a job. They decided to bring him back, but Ty Johnson was that entire team last year. He was averaging 21 points per contest. This team was really good at generating turnovers, 11th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but pounded on the glass. 326th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. You've got Carl Doherty back. He was able to give you about 5 points per contest. Niles Cooper was able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game, but now you're looking at Connor Salviero to really be the main guy for this team. 9 points per contest, shot 36% from three-point range. Braden Fajemi is going to be able to come in, and he's going to be able to give you some versatility. 11.5 points, 4 boards, 4.7 assists, 1.5 steals per game last season over at Central Arkansas. Here's what needs to be pointed out. Central Arkansas, they play out there in a conference in the Atlantic Sun that is less than that of the Big West for one, and two, Central Arkansas was terrible. I mean, terrible. So someone had to get those numbers, and it might have just so happened to be our good man in Fajemi. So I do think that for UC Davis, you're staring at a long year for them. Number 10 in my projector or finish is the Aggies. Number 9, we're going to be going with Long Beach State. I do think that Coach Acker is in for another relatively rough year. This was the second worst conference win percentage that they had in the 57-year history of the program last year, but you bring in Shaquille Bender. He comes on over from Manhattan, 11 points, 2 assists per contest. Grant Grodzik, as a true freshman last season over at Detroit, shot about 41.5% from three-point range. And Long Beach State was not a bad three-point shooting team last season. They were a top 75 team in terms of lighting it up from three-point range. You're bringing a guy in Isaiah Lewis, who I think that he's pretty rock solid. 3 assists, 9.5 points, stealing half per contest. Demercy Johnson, he comes over after being on the bench over at San Diego State, a former top 200 recruit, and he was a part of that Acker system. Acker comes over after being an assistant over at San Diego State, and you do bring back Derek Michael Ziviero. Last season down low was able to give the team nearly 7 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, and Cole Farrell, he's able to shoot about 37.5% from three-point. The team last year was 324th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis because they turned the ball over a ton. I do think that Lewis and Bender coming in, that'll have this team in a little bit of better hands and being able to take a step forward. So at number 9 in my projected finish, I'm going to be going with Long Beach State. At number 8, now the decisions start to come. I am going to be going with Cal Poly. Cal Poly does lose so much from a season ago, and many of these guys that Mike DeGeorge had under his system, they were guys that were familiar with him from the Division II level. So having to replace 5 of your top 6 scorers, that's a little bit rough. Now they do bring back Peter Benege. He was over with the team with about 10.5 points, 4 boards, 2.3 assists per contest last year, but Now you're looking at guys like Guzman, Vasilic, along with Curion, Elliott. Both of these guys have between 5 to 5.5 points per contest. Not a ton coming in via the transfer portal, though Jake Davis, who was over at Illinois last year, he's a guy that you want to highlight. He didn't see many minutes over at Illinois last year, but at Mercer was a sharpshooter 2 seasons ago. 9 points per contest, shot nearly 39% from 3-point range. Luka Tarlik, he was able to give you about 3.5 points per contest off the bench last season. Aaron Price Jr., I think that he's going to be able to give you a bit of something, but Price Jr. at 6'8" is the tallest man on the roster. You just don't have a lot of size, and I recognize that Cal Poly is really looking to play positionless basketball, but they're going to get absolutely pelted on the glass, and I think that that's going to be an issue for them. So at number 8 in my projector finish, I'm going to be going with Cal Poly. At number 7, I'm going to be going with Cal State Northridge, a.k.a. CSUN. And for CSUN, I really love Andy Newman. He has done a great job of just being able to elevate this team. They were 9th in the country in rebound percentage last season, 11th in total possessions per game, but you have to replace all 5 of your top scorers from a season ago. You have Grady Lewis as the top returning scorer with about 6 points, 4 boards per contest. Now, Texas State transfer Josh O'Garrow, I think is going to be solid. Nearly 7 boards, 9.5 points per game. Shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Josiah Davis, he was over at Niagara last year. He should be able to help run the point, 3 assists, 9.5 points per contest. And Larry Hughes II. Last season, he didn't necessarily see a ton of minutes over at St. Louis. 2 years ago, shot in the mid-30s from 3, 7 points per contest, and he's able to generate steals. CSUN, not only were they a good rebounding team, but they were also nice in terms of being able to generate turnovers, but it just doesn't feel like they have got as much depth from a season ago, and with a team that plays as up-tempo as CSUN does, I do think that that is going to be to their detriment, so I do think that's going to be a little bit of a rough year for them. As a result, I do have CSUN in my projector finish at number 7. And number 6, I like this UC Riverside team. I do feel like hiring from that Cal State Bernardino sort of tree, and Gus Arginal is very good, and you've got Ben Grischetti, who's coming back after he missed all of last season at 6'11". During the 2023-24 campaign, shot 38% from 3, 8 points per contest. Osiris Grady, he comes in after he was over at Utah State last season. He was able to see some nice minutes, 5.5 points per contest. Denzel Hines over at Coastal Carolina was able to give you 6 boards per contest. This is not going to be a team that lights it up from 3-point range, but you've got Makeel Worthy, who comes on over from UMass, where he was able to average about 2 steals per contest. Dylan Godfrey, he was an okay 3-point shooter with about 8.5 points per contest as a 6'8" combo player. From Canisius, BJ Colley at 6'10". Size upon size upon size. UC Riverside not going to be playing fast, but they should be able to win a lot of battles down low. They're going to be rock solid at the forward spots. I do think that they make some rock solid in the conference. I've got UC Riverside at number 6 in terms of my projector or finish. And number 5, going to be going to UC San Diego. You've got Eric Olin, who he decides that he is going to be heading on over to New Mexico, but they stay in-house. They hire on Clint Allard. Now, last year, this team was 4th in the country in turnovers forced on a per possession basis, 18th in three-point shooting at 38.1%. They don't have the talent to be able to duplicate that, but you've got Aiden Burke. He's a guy that was able to shoot 39% from last year in a little bit of an ancillary role. He should be able to take some strides forward. Ty Dunn is going to need to get her done. He was over at Buffalo last year. He was Mr. Do-It-All for them. 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, 5.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest, 3.9 turnovers per game, was second in all of college basketball, but that Buffalo team had absolutely nothing at all, so that is something that needs to be taken into account. Bull Dengit, he comes on over from Portland, 7.5 points, 4 boards, 38% 3-point shooter, good versatility there. Hudson Ward, he's a former top 200 recruit from the class of 2024 by 247 Sports, comes on over from Penn State. And Alex Falcon, a smoldering 47.9% 3-point shooting last year over at Lafayette. I like the pieces of this team. I don't think that they're as good as last year. They're not going to be able to generate as many turnovers as they did last year, but I still think that this is going to be a rock-solid team. San Diego, number 5 in terms of my projector or finish. And number 4, we are going to be going with the Roadrunners. Meet for Cal State Bakersfield. They do lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from a season ago, but CJ Hardy makes this team hardy. 9.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest, 44.4% 3-point shooter last year. And now you bring back AJ George into the Big West. Last year was buried on the SMU bench. 2 years ago, when he was over at Long Beach State, 10.5 points, 4 boards, career 37% 3-point shooter at 6'6". Good versatility there. After missing the 2024-25 season, Dallin Smith is a nice diamond in the rough find, 14 points per contest while he was over at Alabama A&M, and he joins a team that was shooting 37.2% from three-point range last year, top 30 mark in all of college basketball, went up to 38.8% in road games. I mentioned it with Connor Ope. This team is at their best when they're rock solid down low. Pierre Gansete Jr., hopefully I said that correctly, comes over from Fresno State, where everything went wrong for Fresno State, but at 6'11", he should be able to give this team some good production. And Ron Jessamy, he was over at Tennessee State last season, 1.3 blocks, 5.5 rebounds per game. He fortifies things down low. I think that Bakersfield is going to be able to play their style once again. They're going to slow things down. They're going to be rock solid. I've got Bakersfield at number 4 in my projector or finish. And number 3, Hula Hula for the Rainbow Warriors, a team that ranked 19th in the country last year in terms of rebound percentage. They looked at a 6'10" Seton Hall transfer, Yasan Toomey, to be able to help things out. Now, last year, he was pretty much glued to the bench when he was over at Seton Hall, but at Evansville 2 seasons ago, 10.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest, and Tanner Cuff played with him. He was over at Evansville last year. He was averaging about 9 points, a little bit over a steal per contest. At 6'7", a mid-30s three-point shooter. Hunter Erickson comes on over from Utah after he was able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. Keandre 3000 Bullock was a 37% three-point shooter over at South Dakota. He was a double-figure scorer. Jalen Myers is coming in after he led Norfolk State in rebounding with 5.5 boards per contest. This team is going to be rough and tumble down low, and you take a look at the way that Aaron Hoken Clater was able to wrap up the season last year. He averaged only about 3.8 points, 2.5 assists per contest, but in the last 18 games of the season, closer to 3.3 assists per game, 5.5 points per contest, shot 41% from three-point range, and Harry Ruvadev was able to give you about 6.5 points per contest. You're bringing a 7-footer in Isaac Johnson, who comes over from Utah State, and he was a full-time starter 2 seasons ago from a team that made the NCAA tournament, shot 34% from three. Hawaii is going to be tough defensively. They're going to have good versatility. I've got them at number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 2 and number 1 are tough because these teams are neck and neck. At number 2, I'm going to be going with UC Irvine. They were 4th in the country in fewest points allowed on a per possession basis on the road last year. They have to replace so much from a season ago, but bringing back Darren Sarin, who 2 seasons ago gave the team 10 points per contest, shot 35% from three-point range. That's going to be rock solid. You've got Tenorian Lee back after he was a 37% three-point shooter, 6'10", Kyle Evans. He's going to need to replace a lot of what you lose from Devin Tillis, along with Benton Lycan, but I do think that he's up for the task. Was able to give the team a block per contest, and this program has finished either 1st or 2nd in the Big West standings 11 out of the last 12 years, and they have won at least 10 conference games in each of the last 13 years. You want to talk about a machine under Coach Turner. Yep, Turner down for what right there. And then you bring back Jurian Dixon. He was able to give the team about 9 points, 3 boards per contest, mid-30s three-point shooter. Now, they do lose quite a bit from last year, but UC Irvine going to be back towards the top of the conference. You know what to expect out of Coach Turner. I've got them number 2, my projector or finish. But number 1, we are going to be going with the Gauchos of UC Santa Barbara. They look to stay hot from 3 after they shot 38.1% from three-point range as a collective. Number 18 in all of college basketball, and Ada Mahaney. Disappointing last year over at UConn, but 2 years ago at St. Mary's was all WCC. 14 points, 2.5 assists, shot 37.5% from three-point. She's going to dominate in this conference. Jason Fontenot, he's back after he gave you 10 points, 6 boards, 2.7 assists per contest as a 6'6" combo player. Colin Smith is a guy that at 6'8", shot 43.5% from three-point range last season. Mario Little comes on over from Utah, 5.5 points, 3 boards, 3 assists per contest. Usana Kintage, he's coming back after missing all of last year due to injury 2 seasons ago over at Louisiana. 12 points, 6.5 boards per contest. This team is Noah's Ark. They've got 2 of everything. Marvin McGee is coming over from Bakersfield. Meep Meep at 6'7", 10 points, 3.5 boards, career 35.5% three-point shooter. Zion Sensley, he's back after he shot 36% from three-point range off the bench. And then you've got Cote Kiat Tong, hopefully I said that correct. He's a little bit of a depth piece at 6'9". That's also able to give you 3+ rebounds per game as well. This team is rock solid down low. Ada Mahaney is going to elevate this team with the Gerzer backcourt. This team was a little bit lackluster on defense last year. Mahaney is going to be able to fortify that after his time at St. Mary's. Number 1 in my projector finish, the Gauchos of UC Santa Barbara. And that'll wrap things up for the Big West Conference Preview Edition section right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, large DM, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast by the 5-star review. I'm going to be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So, I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.